Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into Leviticus 14. And let me tell you, this is way more than just a list of ancient rules. It's a powerful, step-by-step story, a journey from being an outcast all the way back into the heart of the community.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll look at the first step outside the camp, the offering at the tabernacle door, and what happens if you're poor. Then we'll switch gears to sickness in a house, how to cleanse it, and finally, what this all means for the community.
All right, so our story doesn't start in a fancy temple. Nope, it begins out in the wilderness, literally outside the camp. This is where it all has to start, on neutral ground at the very edge of society. Okay, verses 1 and 2 are basically setting the stage. This is the official procedure for the day of cleansing. But verse 3, this is where the action really starts. I want you to picture this. A priest, a man of God, leaves the safety of the camp, walks out into the unknown to meet this person who's been completely isolated. And he leans in to look, to make that one crucial call. Has the sickness actually healed? Everything hinges on this moment. Now in verse 4, look at the strange collection of items they bring. It's not random, it's packed with meaning. You've got 2 small, living birds, a piece of cedar wood, which was known for resisting rot, some scarlet yarn, the color of life, of blood, and a sprig of hyssop, which was like their ancient version of a purifying soap. Then in verse 5, the scene gets even more specific. The priest takes a simple clay pot, holds it over a stream of fresh living water, and one of those birds is killed, its blood mixing right into that flowing water.
So in verse 6, the priest takes that bundle, the cedar, the yarn, the hyssop, and the living bird, and dips the whole thing into that bowl of blood and water. Then comes verse 7, the real climax of this outdoor ritual. He sprinkles that mixture on the person 7 times, 7 the number for completion, and then the big finale. He opens his hands and lets that living bird go. Just imagine watching it fly away, stained with blood, carrying the sickness and the isolation off into the horizon. What a powerful image of freedom.
Verses 8 and 9 lay out this week-long transition period. So in verse 8, the person gets to come back into the camp, but not all the way. They have to stay outside their tent. They wash all their clothes, and then they have to shave off all their hair. I'm talking head, beard, eyebrows, everything. It's a complete shedding of their old identity. They wait a full week, and then in verse 9, they do it all over again. One final, thorough cleansing to get ready for what comes next.
Okay, so now it's day 8. This is a huge moment. The person, now physically clean, is brought right up to the entrance of the tabernacle itself. This is the very center of spiritual life for the whole community. They are re-entering sacred space.
Verse 10 tells us what they have to bring with them, and it's a pretty big deal. Just picture this little procession. 3 perfect lambs, no blemishes at all. That's for atonement. Then fine flour, the stuff of life, mixed with oil, and a special portion of pure oil, which is a symbol of blessing. This isn't just a small token. This is a serious act of worship.
All right, from verse 11 to 14, we get to the heart of this ceremony. In verse 11, the priest presents the person. Verse 12, 1 lamb becomes a trespass offering. But verse 14, this is where you really need to zoom in. The priest takes a little bit of that blood and dabs it on 3 specific spots: the tip of the person's right ear, the thumb of their right hand, and the big toe of their right foot. It's like he's rededicating everything, what they hear, what they do with their hands, and everywhere they walk.
Now, verses 15 through 18 do almost the exact same thing, but this time with oil, a symbol of blessing. Picture this. The priest puts the oil directly on top of the blood that's already on the ear, the thumb, and the toe. It's this beautiful picture of blessing covering the atonement. And then in verse 18, whatever oil is left over, he pours it right over the person's head. It's a full anointing, a complete restoration.
And finally, verses 19 and 20 wrap it all up. The last 2 offerings are made on the big altar at the tabernacle. You can just imagine the smoke rising up, a public signal to everyone. The sin offering, the burnt offering, it's all done. Atonement is made. The priest makes the official declaration, this person is clean. The journey is complete.
But you might be thinking, what if you couldn't afford all those lambs? That's a lot. Well, the law is way ahead of you. It makes this incredible provision, showing that this journey back to community isn't just for the rich.
Verse 21 is just amazing. It lays out a core principle here. If you're poor, the requirements change. The really expensive parts could substitute it. So instead of needing 3 lambs, you only need 1, and you can bring 2 birds instead of the other 2. Even the amount of flour is reduced. It's designed so that absolutely everyone has a path back, no matter what their bank account looks like.
And verses 22 through 32 really hammer this home. The ritual? It's exactly the same. The priest performs the same sacred acts. That careful dab of blood and oil on the ear, thumb, and toe still happens. This shows that the meaning and the dignity of the ceremony aren't lessened one bit. The path to restoration is just as powerful, just as complete for the poor as it is for the wealthy.
So we've covered personal cleansing from top to bottom. But the chapter pivots here to a really interesting question. What happens when the problem isn't in a body, but in the building where a family lives? Now the spotlight moves from a person to a house. And what's wild is that the law treats this contamination in the walls with the same level of spiritual seriousness as a disease in a human being. So in verses 33 to 38, you can just feel the anxiety. A homeowner sees these weird greenish or reddish streaks spreading on their walls, and they have to call the priest. The priest shows up, but before he even goes inside, he tells them to empty the house so their furniture doesn't become unclean too. Then he inspects the walls, and if it looks bad, he puts the whole house under lockdown, a 7-day quarantine.
Then in verses 39 through 42, they perform what is basically surgery on the house. If the mold or plague has spread, they physically tear the infected stones right out of the wall. Then they scrape the entire inside of the house clean and rebuild it with new stones and fresh plaster. It's a drastic, all-out effort to save the home.
But verses 43 to 47 give us the worst-case scenario. What if, after all that work, the plague comes back? Well, that's it. The house is declared unclean for good. And you have to imagine this heartbreaking scene. The entire house is demolished. Stones, timber, plaster, everything is torn down and carted off to an unclean place outside the camp. The contamination was just too deep to fix.
But what if the surgery works? If the house is healed after the repairs, its journey back to being clean looks incredibly similar to the ritual for a person.
And here, from verse 48 to 53, it's like we're seeing an echo of the very beginning of the chapter. They bring the same items: 2 birds, cedar, scarlet, hyssop. 1 bird's blood is mixed with water. The priest then sprinkles that mixture on the house 7 times, and then once again, he lets the living bird fly free, symbolizing that the house's sickness is now gone for good. The home is restored. So, after all these incredibly detailed steps, we finally get to the big takeaway. This whole chapter isn't just a random collection of rules, it's a system, a clear, reliable system for bringing order out of chaos, whether that chaos is in a person or in a home.
And these last verses just spell it all out. The text tells us its own purpose, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This whole thing is a guidebook for knowing the difference between health and sickness, between order and disorder. It gives the community a clear, tangible path to deal with contamination and bring people and even their homes back into a state of health and wholeness.